It began on a tranquil Sunday afternoon, when the peace of a suburban street was disrupted by the clamor of an exasperated woman yanking at a door that wasn't hers. Curious neighbors peered from behind blinds, murmuring, uncertain of the commotion. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of the HOA, stood on the stoop of a stranger's home, jerking the knob as if she owned the place. Her voice was cutting, grumbling accusations, convinced the resident didn't belong. Unbeknownst to her, the man inside held a story far richer than appearances suggested, and his family wielded an authority she could never challenge. The neighborhood watched, stunned, unaware this clash was about to erupt into something unforgettable. Inside, Marcus, a recent arrival to the community, saw his home as more than walls and windows. It was a vow of security for his loved ones. As he brewed coffee, the abrupt clatter at his door startled him. Approaching, he froze at the sight of Karen, furiously tugging the handle, her face contorted with self-righteous indignation. Through the window, she hurled claims, insisting the house couldn't be his. Marcus stayed composed, his years of restraint guiding him to choose silence over confrontation. But Karen's tone sharpened, and soon her threat, "I'm calling the cops," sliced through the air. Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew this wasn't just about a door, it was something deeper, poised to challenge him like never before. Phones hummed with activity. Karen's 911 call had set events in motion. She stood smug on the porch, certain she was about to unmask a trespasser. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some quietly filming, others questioning her actions. Marcus remained inside, his breathing steady, refusing to mirror her fury. He trusted that truth would prevail. Karen didn't realize her rash behavior was already crafting a narrative she couldn't steer. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, and Karen grinned, confident that help was coming to affirm her suspicions. But she was oblivious to the twist fate had in store. The first responder wasn't just any officer. It was someone she never saw coming. The patrol car pulled up, lights flashing against neatly manicured lawns. Karen adjusted her posture, brushing off imaginary lint as if she were the wrong party. But when the car door swung open, the atmosphere shifted. Sheriff Daniel, Marcus's son, stepped out, his boots hitting the ground with purpose. His eyes locked on his father's home, a place he knew well. Karen rushed toward him, gesturing wildly at the house, her accusation spilling out, claiming Marcus was an intruder. But Daniel's gaze stayed on his father, the men who raised him. The street fell quiet. Karen rambled on, unaware the officer before her grew up cherishing that house as Dad's haven. What was about to unfold would shatter her misplaced certainty. Daniel raised a hand, cutting Karen off mid-rant. "That's my father's home," he stated, his voice blending the weight of law and family. Karen's face paled, her words catching in her throat. She stammered, grasping for an excuse, but Daniel's commanding presence offered no leeway. Neighbors gasped, some muttering, "That's his dad," while others shook their heads at Karen's hubris. Marcus opened the door, stepping into the light with quiet dignity, his calm a stark contrast to her unraveling composure. Daniel's gaze softened briefly toward his father but turned stern when facing Karen. "You've squandered public resources on baseless assumptions," he said. The truth hit hard, and Karen's reign of control began to collapse before the crowd. Karen's voice quavered as she tried to justify herself, claiming she was safeguarding the community. But Daniel was unmoved. He stressed that true protection stems from respect and facts, not bias or arrogance. His words carried the authority of both a sheriff and a son defending his family's honor. The neighbors began to side with Marcus, some offering silent apologies for doubting him. Karen, once a towering figure, now seemed diminished, her influence fading in the space she thought she ruled. Marcus stayed quiet, letting his son's words deliver the justice he'd patiently awaited. In that moment, the community saw this wasn't just about a door, it was about the principles binding them together. As evening fell, the street still hummed from the day's events. Karen, once the neighborhood's loudest voice, stood humbled, her authority undone by her own actions. Daniel rested a hand on his father's shoulder, a quiet vow to always stand by him. Marcus gazed at the neighbors, his steady strength showing them who he truly was. Slowly, the tension eased as people approached with handshakes, apologies, and words of support. Karen slipped away, her voice drowned by the unity she'd tried to fracture. The house, once questioned, now stood as a beacon of resilience and truth. For Marcus, a day that began with a rattling door ended with a powerful truth. When family and justice align, no force, however loud, can break them. Days later, the memory of that afternoon lingered across the neighborhood. Those who once doubted Marcus now greeted him warmly. Kids waved as they biked past his house, and neighbors who'd kept their distance now offered smiles and small acts of kindness. Karen retreated into silence, her era of control through fear and accusations over, replaced by the sting of her own shame. For Marcus, it wasn't about retribution, it was about healing. He sat on his porch, coffee in hand, peace settling in his heart. Daniel often visited, his patrol car parked proudly out front, a reminder that this family was here to stay and lead by example. What began as an act of arrogance became a lesson for all. A community thrives on trust, respect, and unity, not rules or fear. Now, passing Marcus's home, people saw not suspicion but strength, a reminder that truth always prevails. Karen had never felt such heavy silence. Once, her presence commanded the neighborhood, every complaint or demand met with compliance or unease. Now, her steps went unnoticed, doors stayed shut, whispers trailed her, and the power she once held slipped away like dust in the wind. Alone, she replayed Daniel's words, "That's my father's home." They stung more than she'd admit. For the first time, Karen saw herself as her neighbors did, not a guardian, but a disruptor. Pride clashed with guilt, but guilt was gaining ground. She realized her so-called authority had built barriers, not bonds. That night, staring into her mirror, Karen whispered something new, "I was wrong." It was small, but it marked the start of something unfamiliar, a chance to grow. The next weekend, Karen did the unexpected. For the first time in years, she walked the neighborhood without her clipboard, clutching a folded note instead. Each step toward Marcus's porch, where she'd once rattled the door in anger, felt heavier. Marcus sat calmly, sipping coffee, his gaze steady as Karen paused at his walkway. Neighbors watched, curious if this was another clash. But Karen's voice trembled, not with anger but vulnerability. "Marcus. I'm here to apologize," she said, offering the note as proof of her regret. She owned her fear, her pride. And her mistake in judging him. Silence lingered. Marcus studied her, his expression neither cold nor warm, just measured. Then, he nodded and said, "Change comes through deeds, not just words." The neighbors leaned in, sensing that while forgiveness wasn't immediate, something significant had begun.